Asante sana, and a good morning to each and every one of you. Now, the thing is this, whether with COVID or without COVID, we have actually seen the education sector transform in ways that you cannot imagine. COVID only seemed to catalyze it. And what we came to discover is that, you know, we have many things that we need to prepare for. There are many gaps, and there are also many, many opportunities. This morning, to help me unpack what is the future of education in terms of technology, I've got an awesome panel. And I'll start with, you know, there's Nisha Ligon, the co-founder and CEO of edutainment producer Ubongo. We've got Sam Gishuru, CEO of online school Kidato. Ethnic Mutinda, who's the country manager of a training and certification organization called ICDL. Antti Ramo, CEO of EdTech platform StarCloud. And Mohammed Adan, CTO of Dawati. Guys, class is in session. And we'll begin with Nisha. I mean, we have seen some solid investments in the edutainment space. I mean, you've got companies like Little Baby Bum. I mean, for those of you who are young parents, you know, LBB, Little Baby Bum got acquired for $9 million. We've got Super Strikers, right, that got bought out as well in 2019. And last year, you know, Coco Melon and Blippi got bought out for a whooping $120 million. So I know Ubongo is right now a non-profit, but the question is, what does it take to kind of like achieve the sort of distribution and scale that will whet the appetite for whether it's governments or investors to then look at the edutainment space a bit differently?
Yeah, thanks, Ngugua. It's great to be here and to be able to share from our experiences. I think one of the things that we really have to think about, and we're having this conversation about education here, is that edutainment has two sides, right? It's both the entertainment side, which is really where that revenue is coming in for those various companies that you mentioned, and also the education side. And one of the things that's a little bit different for us here in sub-Saharan Africa is that while, you know, you have something like Blippi or Little Baby Bum, where they are catering to an audience of English speakers who are, you know, you'll have many of them in places like America and the UK, and 1 billion in India. If we want to be educationally effective, we need to also produce things locally and for local audiences. And the market is not quite at the same place yet with that. So what we have to be doing is, when we think about these opportunities, really balancing between, okay, what is marketable and profitable, and what is educationally effective for the audience that we have to have. So we at Ubongo, we've done this quite a bit, and we've learned, you know, our focus has been on an African audience. We create content in 9 different languages. We distribute through the technologies that they can access, which are mostly radio and TV. Yes, we put content on YouTube, but the vast majority of our audience, you know, we're talking 24 million users a month, are accessing via traditional technologies like radio and TV, which have a very different model for how they're funded and monetized. Which in most of the world, educational TV is government funded. So you'll have PBS in the US, BBC in the UK. So that's, I think, one thing to note that's really important. We can't just get to the internet-based and data-reliant technologies and leave behind all of the other kids. So those are the platforms that we use a lot. And then we have a smaller audience on, say, YouTube, like you mentioned. And what we found is that the monetization for YouTube, all of the money that we generate there, it's coming from outside of Africa, right? So we get 1 million viewers a month from the US, another couple 100,000 from UK and Australia and places like that. And yes, you can start to monetize those audiences. But the question is, are you going to switch and focus on them, or keep a focus on the needs of kids in Africa and educating them? And so I think there is that really important question we have to ask.
I think Nisha's frozen a bit again. Technology, streaming, bandwidth, etc. So let me come to you, Sam. I mean, Nisha comes from a space of, you know, edutainment. I know majority of those anthems and jingles off head. But then Kidato comes in and says, we are also a learning platform. And having seen what the pandemic did, and, you know, parents trying to shift from, you know, what are the more efficient ways of homeschooling my kids, or are there other ways that I can get my child to access better information? What are some of the, you know, touch points between what you guys do at Kidato and, you know, traditional learning, like we've been used to going to a class or attending class in the traditional sense?
Thank you very much, Mbogwa, for being the host of this session, and for the panelists. They are pretty amazing people. I've followed some of you in your work, Nisha. It's been very inspiring seeing what Ubongo is doing over the last couple of years. I think, so just moving toward the online conversation, and I guess one of our bigger, let me break this into three pieces. And one of them is that school doesn't have to be a place where kids go to anymore. And I think Ubongo has proven this as well with the amazing content they have put out. Learning can be done anywhere. And so what pandemics have taught us clearly is that you can teach children from any part of the world, and they are going to learn. And so even as Kidato, as we are growing right now, we had one of the things we're dealing with, one of the major problems we deal with, one of the bigger hurdles we deal with is with parents is usually, what about social interactions? And you know, what about physical interactions? I mean, and we say that physical interaction is just not being in the bus, or when you're running for your 10 o'clock break, or you're running for the field for a few minutes. Physical interaction has to be quality interactions. And our experience is that in 40 minutes in a class of 20 plus students, there is zero interactions. In a class of 10 plus students online, is zero interactions. But when you bring the class to 5 students, there is full interactions and peer-to-peer learning. That's high quality interaction. And so we say, other than that, we're able to also now do the touch points of ensuring that every Saturday kids have swimming, they have hockey, they have basketball, they have football, they're doing all of these other things that they normally do in a brick and mortar school. And it's clear that, as you mentioned, the pandemic is telling us that, hey, listen, I'm not going away. There'll be more pandemics in the future. I mean, this won't happen, others will happen. So the second part, I guess, I'd be able to address that and say, from just Ubongo again, you notice children are natural learners. If you have a 3-year-old child and you give them a phone with YouTube, then you realize that within a year, they'll be able to be speaking a foreign language. It could be English, it could be Mandarin. They will be able to speak a foreign language, words, and even express themselves to a great degree. Children are natural learners. And so, I mean, again, with the right tools and the right instructors, kids can be able to learn anywhere. At this question you asked earlier, and he said, what are the touch points probably between physical schools and online schools? At this particular point, I'm seeing we need to have chemistry labs, biology labs, physics labs that are offline. But this, I believe, in another year or two, they'll also go virtual. And kids will be able to run experiments, science experiments on virtual labs. And so at this particular point, the only physical touch point I see for a physical facility is definitely the biology labs and the chemistry labs and the physics labs.
Fantastic. I think that speaks into some of the opportunities that are available, in the sense that I remember growing up in school, we didn't have a swimming pool. So we used to go to a particular center that had a pool. And what we found is that many schools around the area actually utilize that particular resource. So one of the unintended consequences is that we might actually start seeing people put up specific infrastructure for things like what you just mentioned. You know, a kilometer away from school, maybe there's a physical chemistry lab or biology lab that then gets utilized by, 50 schools, whether they're online or physical, that then helps people or entrepreneurs then plan for, sort of investments into additional physical infrastructure. Because I think one of the things people often forget is that anything digital still has to be powered by quite a bit of physical infrastructure. Thanks for that, Sam. Now, on to you, Antti. I mean, looking at the stuff that you've built, you actually are pretty bold in saying that you've developed a digital textbook standard. And, when you talk about standards, it implies that, wide acceptability, wide usage. At what point, or what was the process of you working through what you now call your digital textbook standard? And at what point did you feel that as an organization, you have then achieved what can be called a standard?
First of all, hello to everybody. It's great to be here. Nice to meet you. Let me explain a little bit. Well, actually, this approach of talking about something universal, solving universal problems in the education sector is something that has been included in the whole development of the technology that we provide. And the thinking behind this is that when we take a step back and look at education systems and these common properties of education systems and how education is delivered systematically across these systems, then where we mostly do our work is in the area of digital content, and I'm talking about textbooks. And what role have textbooks and workbooks played in the last couple of hundred of years in all education systems across the world? So, and what we see is that this, and even when we look at the top PISA countries from the world, then these top countries all have things in common, and one of those is the general usage of high-quality learning materials in schools, and also the availability of these high-quality learning materials. And when we started StarCloud around 7-8 years ago, we understood quickly that when developing software for educational publishing to digitize textbooks, workbooks, we are solving universal problems, because the publishing industry is mostly not a technology industry. So in order for to achieve a widespread digitization of learning materials and using the possibilities of digital technology, this would need a universal approach. And this is what we have been concentrating on. And the markets we have entered, we have started cooperation with, give us confidence that this is the way to go. Although, of course, big publishing houses have the capacity to develop high-quality digital technologies. However, those are in the whole world scale are only a few that would have this kind of know-how, this kind of capacity. And in order to have this technology accessible for the whole industry, it needs to be approached universally as well.
Fantastic. I think what I hear you saying is that, you know, maybe the way to go is that instead of each and every publisher, say, trying to develop their own stack or their own platform, especially when it comes to capturing content, that it's much better that you have, you know, 1 or 2 or 3 or a handful of players that then you know, use a particular standard to make sure that whatever information, you know, a school like Kidato needs to ingest into their system, whatever other way that, you know, Nisha with Ubongo needs to consume that content, there's, you know, one way and one easy way to do that, as opposed to, you know, having multiple people trying to put out different things.
Yes, if I just, if you allow me to bring a simple example here. So if every musician would start to develop their own Spotify, for example, or every musician would start to have to develop their own piano, for example, just, you know, to have this kind of high quality materials, high quality services, there is this, how do you say, we do each of our own part in the work, and together we will bring this quality. So each one of us does not have to invent everything from the ground up. So let's concentrate on these parts that we are strong at. And in terms of educational publishing, definitely their strong points are in the content side, not so much in bringing technology onto the table.
Fantastic. I think before I move on to Mutinda, one important point to make is that, you know, when talking about a standard, it's not converting documents or scanning books and making them into PDFs. I mean, there's a lot that goes into how you actually create this content to make it searchable, to make it, you know, accessible in different ways and in different formats. Over to you, Ethnic. I mean, we've talked about technology. You know, Kidato is an online school. Ubongo's out there producing content and distributing it. We kind of like focus a lot on the technology. You know, Auntie's out there also pushing a platform. But we hardly ever really speak to and about the constituency of users that this technology is supposed to serve. And I'm curious, from your training and what your organization does, what are some of the gaps that you've seen, or some of the assumptions actually that we make when it comes to thinking about digital learning?
Thank you, Mbugua, and it's good to be part of this conversation. ICDL is a digital skills development organization. We are a social enterprise, and our mandate is to just develop people's skills worldwide. And this conversation that we're having about e-learning is part of our core work that we do. And one of the things that we've been experiencing in implementing ICDL in many, many parts of the world is that there's a perception about what we call digital natives, this younger generation of people who have grown up with technology and internet. And that the perception is that these young people do not need to develop digital skills, but they can just learn them through assimilation by using devices, accessing social sites, and that they don't need any sort of formal training, particularly when it comes to skills that are needed for the workplace. And that has been largely the mandate that we have as a digital skills certification organization, is to provide people with those skills. So the perception out there, which is really a fallacy, is that digital natives, people younger than I am, who have grown up, are just naturally tech savvy. They've been exposed to technology from a very young age. You'd notice that even in the home setting, young children can use devices better than their parents. They actually can know features about your phone that you as a parent might not know those features existed. So the truth is that they have been exposed to technology from a very young age. The fallacy, however, is that there is no need for formal training. What we have found is that in the learning institutions, there is need for formal training, giving students or young people access to computers and devices. And connectivity is not enough. Mm-hmm. There is need to have a structured way of developing the skills and competencies that are needed for today's marketplace and workplace.
Fantastic. I think you surfaced quite an interesting point. Some had mentioned earlier the way, you give a toddler a phone, and within a few weeks they're able to navigate, swipe left, know where YouTube is, know where a particular app is. And what I hear you saying is that maybe not. What you need to actually do is kind of like try formalize it in a way to make sure that even as these digital natives are coming or are being born into this sort of space, that they actually have sort of like almost a curriculum, I hear you say, that they can follow, that we can then say, my son, my daughter is then proficient or has been empowered sufficiently. So if you then expose them to all the different technologies out there, they are well able to take care of themselves. That's fantastic. Nisha, we come back to you. Sorry, we lost you earlier. And now we say that we live in the age of the creator or the producer. You're on TikTok, you're producing content, whether it's comedy, whether it's education. I remember my son coming home with some homework, and the new curriculum in Kenya dictates that you do have to sit there, and we're trying to find out what are your non-traditional domestic animals called in Kiswahili. And then I go and I see that lots of people actually out there creating content. Some is not that great because, resolution, shakiness, poor backgrounds, etc. What does it actually take, as a content producer yourself, to help people understand? What does it actually take to then put out great quality content in the way that that you guys do?
Yeah, I would be hesitant actually to say that everyone would need to create content in the same quality as we do. We have our specific niche, which is that we're trying to create the highest quality content that can be scaled and really pull in a lot of users. But I don't think that's actually necessary for everyone to do. And I've seen amazing examples of teachers and schools putting together really quick and dirty, but high quality content that's got great teaching or distribution online. So I don't think everything has to be animated. And something that we as Upongo have done is we've actually now created all of this content, which is available under Creative Commons licenses. And what we've been able to see is that it's exciting to see, say, a teacher in Nigeria who's going to launch a radio show. Well, they might not have the funds and capacity to create all of these educational songs themselves, but they can go and pull our songs and incorporate those into radio programming that they're creating. Same thing online. We're seeing teachers integrate our content into their YouTube videos. So, you know, you can have that mix and match of high production value stuff like what we do, which costs a whole lot of money, and then also the kind of more localized and more specific content that can target a specific audience. That said, if there were a couple of rules of thumb that I would follow, it's that sound is critical. People will be very forgiving of bad visual, but it's really hard to deal with something that's bad audio quality. So I would focus, if you have limited resources, on sound first, and then story is critical. It's so easy for someone to just switch off or switch to another station or click to the next video. So the key is keeping people engaged, and the way that you do that is story.
Fantastic. Thanks for those insights. Now, Mohammed, I come to you next, and my question is this, and it's pegged to the pandemic. When the shift happened, when schools closed down, and we as parents want our kids to continue learning, there's of course a gap. What's been happening is many times parents have been handing over their children every morning and saying, go to school, and have absolutely no idea what it actually takes to deliver learning. How has Dawati been able to help close that gap in terms of helping parents and guardians then understand that there's actually a process towards knowledge dissemination, and it's not just about, I have switched on the laptop for you, or yes, I've given you my phone to use, you're not paying attention, can you please keep learning? How have you managed that challenge for parents?
Thank you, everyone. And so, as you said, when we started this program first, we did not foresee the situation of the pandemic. So it's something that came, and it definitely accelerated our process. So initially, our target was just to help students and parents who are schooling provide complementary quality learning material. But when the pandemic happened, the situation we faced was that all of a sudden now there was an explosion of interest. Parents were interested. They needed to know what can we do so that this thing that was supposed to be complementary and work for only a few hours now is becoming a whole day. So one of the things that we did was actually to provide to extend the features of our platform. So maybe if I just give a bit of a background on how our platform works, is that it's a learning on demand. So it's not a virtual real time. So what we have done over the period of time, like the last 4 or 5 years, was to develop multimedia content as text, videos, and whiteboarding. And students will go register and then consume those content on demand. So now when the pandemic happened and there was an explosion in interest, now we had to find a way of enhancing now feedback and interactivity. So one of the things we did now was to add an analytics component, which can be used by both teachers, parents, or even the students themselves to track. So one of the interesting things, for example, I had noted was this did not apply to all parents, but there was one parent, for example, from Muranga who had registered. And every time I log into the platform, for example, I will find that this morning, let's say from 7:30 to 9 a.m., this student has viewed 20 videos. I come next day, so I noticed a pattern, like over a period of consistently for 1 month, I'm seeing this student coming every day consistently, then consuming 5, 6 videos, 8 videos. So I called the parents and asked them what is happening. Like, this is amazing. Like, this level of consistent, I don't see with. So what the parents told me, it was the father, was that they've actually come up with a sort of a timetable where now, just like the way somebody goes to school, the student will log into the platform. They were using a laptop. So the platform is available as a mobile application, or it's available also as a web. So you can access it if you have internet and and a mobile. I mean internet and just have any browser.
So would you say? Would you say then that parents have actually adapted pretty well in terms of understanding the learning needs of their children? Would you say that is a trend that you've actually seen?
I wish that is what I could say, but unfortunately, those are more of the exceptions than the rule. So there are few parents who are switched on, like that parent, and those are the ones who are able now to derive, the maximum value from this, because all of a sudden, for them, it becomes almost like the equivalent of a school. For example, I will see that student, like today, the student has come online, he opens chemistry, and then he looks through 5 topics, mole concept, gaseous, equation of gases, something like that. So a number of 5, topics that are related. Okay. Tomorrow, from the same time, then another topic in biology, reproduction in X, Y, Z.
I think what that points to then is that there's still a huge gap in terms of how we are able to help parents, understand and therefore also be able to facilitate their children in their learning journey. Let me jump right back to Auntie's space. Mohammed has mentioned on-demand content. Sam does live classes, and then how do we speak into the issue of content quality? You have a platform that ingests a lot of content from different providers. How do we then address the issue of quality? Because if we put out poor quality information or erroneous information, then it means that the amplification of an error becomes that much more. How do you address the issues of quality?
Well, our platform or the service is strictly focused on the curriculum-based learning materials, which means that our content providers already have these quality assurance workflows, all the know-how, how to be in accordance with the curriculum and how to deliver high-quality learning materials. So this is something that we put on the shoulders of the publishers, because this is something that they have been doing for tens and tens of years already. However, the technical solution of the content creating toolset also endorses and gives opportunities to develop this quality further. So to provide kind of interactions that were not possible before, but still keeping in touch with the same kind of quality assurance models that are already there. Yes, absolutely, this is something that without this kind of quality assurance, there is a lot of time wasted, a lot of damage can be happen. So that's how we sort of get this responsibility shared between the stakeholders, and also the curriculum as a backbone to all of the content that we do and provide is also there. So this kind of close relationship and attachment to the ministries of education or curriculum development as such is something that is also included in the whole process. And in terms of digital materials, I think we should also consider the power of data because all of the usage of the materials provides live and very detailed information about how the materials are used, how successfully they are used in terms of learning outcomes. And this in turn gives feedback to all stakeholders, to the content providers, to the teachers, and so on. So this digitality of the content gives a lot of opportunities to go further with the quality as well.
I agree. I think one of the interesting things about digital tooling is that it allows for very quick feedback loops. We've seen instances, at least in Kenya, for example, where a textbook went out with something published wrongly, or there was a funny picture that was not agreeable, and you could imagine what it would take to change that content. But with digital platforms, that's a click away. I think that bell is almost ringing. So for now, I'll ask us to give our closing remarks, starting with Ethnic, Sam, then Nisha, Mohammed, and Ramo, in that order, please. So, Ethnic, please give us your closing thoughts.
Thank you. This conversation is an interesting one, and it's very much part of the work that we do as ICDL. And one of the things that is very key in our observation has been the attitude side of the e-learning journey, which has to do with people, and that has to do with perceived usefulness of the technology, perceived ease of use. These are the things that tend to cause people to push back. But we are seeing across Africa a lot of initiatives and projects by governments in facilitating the training of TVET trainers and teachers, especially to increase capacity to improve the adoption of technology and integrating technology in the classroom. A case in example, in Kenya, for example, the TVET school is also training our own TVET trainers to be ready for the classroom, to use technology in the classroom. We have projects in places like Nigeria where the TVET Fund has been training a large number of people in the university sector and the TVET sector for readiness for that market, even success stories in places like Rwanda. So we are seeing more and more governments coming up with very specific projects to provide capacity building for the trainers. My closing remarks would be that technology is a good thing, and it's an enabler for learning. But the people are the ones who drive technology adoption. And for those of us who are in that space, who are providing capacity building for those who facilitate an adoption of technology, we still have our work cut out for us. It's been a great pleasure being part of this conversation. Over to you.
Thank you, Ethnic. Sam, your 30 seconds.
One of the things I have to say about the space we are in is that education doesn't have to be painful. It doesn't have to be difficult for children. Education can be fun. It can be exciting.
Yes.
And kids can be able to access technology is one of the tools that we can use to ensure that children are enjoying learning. Learning is a lifetime experience. We are still learning in this particular panel today. And so using technology, I believe strongly with everything everybody's doing here, we can be able to make, we can be able to change the continent. We'll be able to produce people who love to learn, who love education, who are able to, to impact this continent, politically, economically. So let's make education fun for children. Let's make that our objective.
That's a great thought, Sam. Most of us probably had, your ABCs beaten into you all the way from ABC to calculus. Nisha, your closing remarks, 30 seconds, please.
Yeah, I really agree with what everyone has said around making learning and fun and it being engaging. So I think I'm going to flip to the other side and think about, since this is an eGov summit, what is the enabling factors or the risk factors that come from government and regulation today? So on the one side, we have examples like Nigeria, where a decision to mandate that broadcasters allocate a certain period of time every day to learning our children's content has made a huge difference. On the flip side, 7 of the countries where we work in have had internet shutdowns or blockages during the pandemic. And we've seen real consequences for learning from this. So we had 300,000 kids learning online in Tanzania. Overnight, that reduced by 93% because the government blocked the platforms that they were using. And we're seeing a really concerning and increasing trend of this continuing to happen, where people will build an entire learning community on a platform, and then overnight the government either shuts it down or adds a tax that people cannot pay to access that platform. And I think for all of the great work that's being done in this space, to work and to thrive, we need that recognition on the regulatory side too about the impact that those regulations and shutdowns can make on learners.
Well, thank you. And the bell has just gone out. The bell has rung in my ear. So unfortunately, we've run out of time. My apologies, Mohammed and Ramo, but at least we got to hear your thoughts in quite clearly on the other subject matters. So to the larger audience, you've heard it from the profits to the non-profits. Changing the technology sector, we need to all play a part. Class dismissed. Keep the discussions going.